Okay, I'm showing 4:37, so I think we'll go ahead and get the show started. I'd like to introduce to you Winnie Litten and Ellen Chevalier, and they are from Oak Park Unified School District. My name is Enoch Kwok. I'm the Director of Technology there. Winnie is the Science Department Chair, and Ellen is the Instructional Technology Specialist. And today we're going to give you a deep dive into how broadband has changed curriculum development in the K-12 setting. Now, how many of you come from a higher ed background? Show of hands. And how many of you are from public libraries? Okay, so traditionally, CENIC has catered to these two constituencies, but there's actually a third constituency that has not been represented very much. And so we're kind of trying to steer that to include more K-12 participation. And so today's presentation is one of the first steps in giving you a broader perspective of the K-12 world. And so this is actually a follow-on presentation. This morning we had a day in the life of a K-12 hyper-connected kid, which kind of talked about how classroom in K-12 has changed with the advent of broadband and one-to-one computing. So today we're going to actually go deeper, and we're going to focus narrow in on how curriculum development has changed with access to one-to-one computing. In our district, in the last 3 years, we've began to put Wi-Fi, broadband, internet into every classroom. And so what you're going to hear about today is only about 2 years old, or even, about 2 years old, 3 years old. And it was made possible by bringing Chromebooks into a one-to-one situation at the high school level. And so we're really proud that I believe the science program that they developed is the first one that is a UC accredited freshman science course that does not rely on a textbook, but relies completely on teacher created materials through a digital curriculum. And so without further ado, let me pass it on to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we are very honored to be here today to talk about curriculum development and how it has changed with high-speed internet available in the classroom. As Enoch said, I'm Ellen Chevalier, Lead Instructional Technology Specialist in Oak Park, but I am coming out of the high school science classroom where Winnie and I had the opportunity to develop a fully digital course that was just UC accredited as a lab science this year, and it is the first of its kind. So we're excited to share that with you.
And my name's Winnie Litten. I've been a science teacher for 30 years, so I've seen quite a bit, and the kids changing, the technology changing in the classroom, and it's been really transformative for us to have high-speed internet, or I'm just going to say internet because that's what I would say in my classroom. We jumped way beyond a textbook and the staticness of a textbook because new technologies, new things that are released, new science being done, we can bring it in our classroom right now. So our high school sits in a bedroom community, and it was starting to decrease in the numbers, and it was affecting class size. And our superintendent was forward thinking, and this was when there was still money in education, and we became an school of choice. Sorry, I was getting in there. School of choice. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of competition for those students, so it worked out well. Since then, it's been a little bit of a hardship for the neighboring communities because many students travel to come to our site. And it's really allowed us to continue with our programs. We're still fairly small, but we do have developed some really wonderful one-to-one programs in both math and science.
So a little bit more about Winnie and I, because you're going to see our personalities come out here in just a moment. So we are both on the Ventura County Office of Education in GSS, which is the next generation science standards, their leadership network. Both of us have held different roles in that Winnie was part of what was known as the Elite Eight, that was looking at the concept of modeling and how we can get students to model scientific phenomena. I was part of the Fab Five, who this year was looking at textbook adoptions and how you can go through a process that's data-driven before adopting a curriculum. We are both district innovators, so we're pedagogically forward, willing to just jump in and try anything. We're also fairly competitive, so when you put us together, we're going to outdo each other, and you're going to see that played out as we talk about the curriculum we've developed. And we're type A, so we didn't just start with one thing, we started with everything, which when we talk to teachers, we say, don't do that.
Just pick one thing.
Just pick one, but it's been a labor of love and something that we're very proud of.
So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the next generation science standards, but when those rolled out, that required a change, and you could either just try to manipulate what you had or recreate. We serve several masters. We have an AP program that is strong, so I couldn't just eliminate and do integrated 9 through 12. We have a 3-year science program, which I'm very thankful for. Many schools only have 2 years, and you have 4 years worth of curriculum that you need to manage within just even 3 years is difficult. So we tried a couple iterations of our freshman introductory class. Many schools you will see will start with biology in their freshman year, but we have quite a few kids who take bio AP, and I teach that to 10th graders, and I've done it for about 25 years, and they're very successful at it, even though it requires calculus. So we didn't want to just jump them into biology in their freshman year. They wouldn't have enough math. So what we did is we created this freshman course, and the first time that we did it, we were afraid to incorporate physics into it because, one, we were concerned with credentialing, and two, the math component. We just thought it wouldn't really meet all the standards. So the first time we did it, we took 1 semester of chemistry and 1 semester of biology, and really both those courses were just there to implement the science practices, which is one of the best parts of NGSS. Is it's not so much about memorizing, but about doing science and the practices of a scientist and cross-cutting concepts. So we were using those 2 curriculum veins to introduce that, and really focusing on lab notebooking. We'll talk about high-tech and low-tech moments in a bit, but to focus on science notebooking. Then we decided we were going to have a problem because we had to incorporate earth science again, which we thought was going to kind of be downplayed with an adaptive NGSS test. So this will be the first year our kids take an exam where the results actually are going to be given back to us as a site. It will not go on our dashboard or any of your dashboards until the second year that it's implemented, and then there's a comparison. And so we kind of threw the dice. We talked a lot as a department, and we decided to develop a freshman course with 1 semester being an earth science physics combination, and that's the one that Ellen and I wrote together. Neither one of us are physics teachers. And then the second semester would be earth science and chemistry. So we worked extensively with our 2 physics teachers on our campus to develop that curriculum and align it with the standards. That took a lot of work, I got to tell you, because we aligned it with NGSS, but also I went begging to Enoch early on and said I knew he was going to pick one department to be 1-to-1, and I wanted that to be my department. And so I said, we will meet the technology standards as well within this freshman course. So we worked with the district hand in hand to develop this technology 1-to-1 program. Then we had to invest a lot, and we divvied up the work, and I wrote, you're going to be introduced to HyperDocs, and so that was the curriculum pathway. And then we integrated as well debriefs, intermittent times where they weren't on the computer as teams, but as a class, more of a traditional lecture, but a discussion that we would have with the students and check for understanding, and then assessments. And we wanted those assessments to model, I'll let you talk about that part. Go ahead. She wrote them.
To model what they would be seeing on the California assessment of the science CAST. Yeah. The California Science Test. Thank you. And those are performance-based tasks, so they're doing something. And so we wanted to incorporate that as well. We were also at a time where there was this thing called fake news starting to happen. And so we needed a way of really helping our kids figure out what was science and what was pseudoscience. And so again, that internet became an integral piece of what we developed. So Winnie and I sat down the summer before this course was to roll out, and we said, how do we utilize all of our resources, the one-to-one, the NGSS, all the media literacy, the ISTE standards, AP's, testing, SAT testing, how do we take all that to maximize student learning? And we decided that we were going to go digital, that there wasn't a textbook out there that could do what we wanted to do. But we wanted to have moments where we valued low tech as well. And so you're going to see we have those places built in where we say Chromebook screens down. We want to talk to you face to face, because that's a skill that young people are not as good at as generations before them. And that's kind of in the iteration process, something that we've tried to actually include more of, or getting them up to speak in front of their peers, not just record a video. And so you'll see those moments played out as we talk about our curriculum. Okay, so impact of high-speed internet, we're going to talk about 5 areas that have been revolutionized by the ability to have one-to-one devices and the internet. The first one will be content delivery. The second one will be student collaboration and communication. We really wanted to increase students working together, being a team. That's the way science is meant to be done. But we didn't want to increase the number of group projects. Because some of you are nodding your head like, I remember group projects, and if you were like Winnie and I, no one did them as well as we could do them, and so all the burden was put on us, and our group members probably loved that because we did all the work. So we wanted that collaboration and to have specific roles within that collaborative process, so everyone was pulling their weight.
Another issue was homework. I have long said to tour groups that come to our school that I feel that homework contributes to the breakdown of the family. There is a high increase of stress. We have very competitive groups that are involved in many more things than I was when I was in high school. And we were really concerned about that. And so we wanted to look for ways to maximize our classroom time and then give students voice and choice in how they practice their learning, had opportunities to review. We don't feel that one size fits all in homework. That's incredible. We don't buy shoes that way, yet teachers just throw out, do these 30 problems. Really? But I got it with the first one. So we wanted to provide, with the technology that we have, there ought to be something that's adaptive in the homework that allows them to do what they need to do that helps them best. So that was one part. And peer feedback was huge. Peer feedback with technology and all of them on one document, which you'll see that coming up again and again in Teams. They will provide feedback, and they can put a comment on a document to somebody in their group that says, hey, you need to support this source. And they can assign it to them so they can work on it even from home, from a hospital bed, from an airport. We have kids jumping into my classroom from all different places while traveling, with their dog barking in the background, but they're still part and they want to be in the classroom. And with the technology we have today, all it takes is a phone and they're right there with us interacting. And then last was assessments. We are trying to work on, in fact, that's one of the goals we talked about. We were just at Q at Palm Springs, was variations in assessments and ways to assess students. And so that's another piece that you'll see.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump into what it might look like in our classroom in those 5 areas. So we modeled our class around the HyperDoc, and you'll see a variety of options for the HyperDoc. What made that possible was a learning management system like Google Classroom. Oak Park is a Google district, and so we're able to push everything out, collect, communicate with our students that way. We provide calendars that are HyperDocs, but really the power of the HyperDoc comes in content delivery and putting the student in the driver's seat instead of being a passive passenger. And this took a lot of convincing both teacher, ourselves, and the student that they could drive the car. And that they could be in control of their learning because they were used to just sitting there, kind of like you're doing now, right? And just hearing the information and then spitting it back out on a Scantron when we asked them to. So Winnie's going to walk you through this document on stress, which we use to talk about the body systems in biology.
So this was following, there are certain systems they need to know about for sure, nervous system and endocrine system and immune system. And then from there on, we need to talk about how the others work together. So I tried to find a concept that we could revolve around all the rest of the systems, and we picked student stress. And so this is, for those of you in education, this is a 5E document. And this is a strategy of laying out information and guiding students. A HyperDoc in the shortest of words would be a curricular pathway or journey I want students to go on. Now, this is coming from a very OCD lady who thinks what she was saying was the most important thing and nobody could replace her. And that was a huge transition, is to let go a little bit and then scoop them back in for the debriefs and guide them. But on the first part is engaging. There are stress tests they could take, and that was it's oversimplification, but it's like a hook into the content that we're going to talk about. And that's something they could talk about with their bio buddy or FOSS buddy, whoever they're working with collaboratively. So that gives them maybe motivation for what we're going to speak about. Now, if I have a straight up textbook, I can tell you there's nothing there that necessarily they're going to be able to access to take that. I have taught for many years, so I have given them tests in the past. That's a photocopy machine, and I can tell you very little time is spent at a photocopy machine. So the time and energy you invest in your high-speed internet pays off in dividends, not using paper. Besides, we are a green school, so we value the least amount of paper use as possible. So they have a stress test, then they explore how stress happens. There are excellent videos out there. It might be a minute long, 2 minutes long, that they respond to. Now, one of the ways this works for us as educators, if you can see there's a question on there, what is a reflection your team has from watching this video? And then in red, you can see the words type. And so what we learned with hyperdocking is we needed to have a differentiation between what we asked them and what we asked them to respond to. And so they have to type all their responses. They just highlight the word type and start typing. It'll be in that font, that color. So it's easier for us to grade. When you think about this and unrolling this with your teachers, we're big into rubrics. It brings equity to the classroom if you're saying why you're grading. It's helpful for the students to know what you're looking for. We find that they're really successful that way. But we will pick certain things to grade. So we can jump around and grade, this go around, I might be grading this thing from Engage and this part from Explore. So you're not reading the whole HyperDoc top to bottom unless you have that kind of time. So then we have some other TED Ed talk that we have in there that they're watching and responding to, how chronic stress affects your brain, another TED Ed talk. Then there's something called Ed Puzzles. Are any of you familiar with Ed Puzzle, the company? Okay, so let me tell you briefly what this is. This is a company where you can get a video from YouTube or it could be a video of myself giving a lecture, and it embeds it, and you can add questions into it. And you can make the questions, if you're smart, you make it multiple choice because it's very easy to grade. But that way it keeps them focused. They can't fast forward. They can rewind, but they can't fast forward. And Ed Puzzle quits if you open up any other app. So they can't, if they just let it play, they still have to be able to have listened in order to answer the questions. So it's a great way to make sure they're on target and on focus while they're listening.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Also, it's a great tool for teachers. Data tells a story that your students may not tell, and Ed Puzzle, you can see how many times they had to watch a particular section of the video to answer the question correctly. So not only is high-speed internet giving students access to content, it's giving teachers access to information that the student may not tell you.
Yes.
So this document, every student, you give this document to every student, and every student is filling this out?
No. So we'll distribute this. How many of you are familiar with Google Classroom? Okay, so for those of you not here, we just don't have time. Otherwise, I'd have you share with somebody who didn't know. But what we would do is we will distribute through Google Classroom, and that's like a little portal to the internet for us to talk back and forth, a platform for us to exchange documents. So if we were a team, then one of us would open up this HyperDoc, and then I would share it with Ellen via the common domain we have through Gmail, through our school system. And then she and I can work on it at the same time. So she can be on her computer typing, and I can be on my computer typing at the same time on the same document. So just one HyperDoc would be turned in for the two of us. If I wanted to distribute it to the entire class, I could. I have lots of options and choices. Okay, so there's several videos through here that have content in them. And then on the elaborate portion, they were able to pick a few of those systems that they wanted to tell more about. I don't want to bore you with a biology lesson, but you can see here at the end on the evaluate and apply, I asked them to Google a few careers and find out what careers are low stress, what careers are high stress, what are you interested in? Is this a stressful job? Why or why not? So it has them looking to the future. Again, static textbook's not going to give me that. And then followed up with 3 specific strategies that they could employ to decrease their own stress level. So what have we done? We've engaged them in the learning. They had some voice and choice in what they wanted to learn. And then I could use this assessment, use this piece for them to share out. This is just one HyperDoc. It is not a super content specific. There are other ones that we're going to do now.
So one of the things we hear is that's great for life science, but you couldn't really do physical science this way. And our answer is, oh, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And so here's one on waves. So this would be from that course that we wrote together. And the same sort of thing. So the 5 E's, engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate, apply, is just that path that we want them to take so they make a personal investment in the learning. This one was really cool because we got to embed information about media literacy and fake news, looking at climate change as the vehicle to go out there and decide what is, fact from fiction, or can you always tell?
I'm going to jump in. This is part of the physical science standards, is actually to know the difference between that.
So they would watch those videos. We're putting in content with climate change. And again, they are a visual generation. Okay. And if you can show them visuals with content, that they live in sound bites. And so we're finding that by presenting the information this way, coming back at strategic points and making sure everyone is on the same page, we clear up miscommunication or misconception, we can reteach content. It's a very powerful way for them to feel like they've owned their learning. The other thing that's really nice about this model is we check in with them. And this is one of the things we're going to talk about that's made the biggest impact on our teaching, is that we made personal connections with every student almost every class period. When I'm just standing up here and there's 36 people staring at me, I'm not making a single connection other than maybe a spark, a light bulb went off in their head. But with this model, I can say, all right, you're working. I'm going to check E1 through E3. I need each of you to conference with me before the end of the period. And I've talked to every student that class period, and I've gotten to tell them, you're almost there. Go back and try again. And there are students who need one chance, and they're going to master it. There are those students who need you to be their champion and stand with them the 6, 7, 8 times it's going to take them to master. If I were to throw a worksheet out at them and them turn it in, it might be a couple days before I know there's a miscommunication or they're not getting a concept. This allows us to know right away and to provide that one-on-one instruction that that particular student needs.
I'm going to jump in there on the conferencing that we do. We do the conferencing with a rubric, things that we're looking for over their HyperDoc before they actually turn it in. What she's talking about is there's time for revision of their work. It's not once and I get the score and that's it, because really that's not learning. It's here, this is where you're at, go revise it, come back and see me again, let's go again. Now I'm going to tell you, students that work slow, who don't use their time wisely in the classroom, they're not going to have as many conferences. But I can note that because it's data driven, right? We should make our decisions based on data. Recently, I started beta testing something called Classroom Q. Again, we make no money from any of these companies that we're talking about, but Classroom Q is awesome because what it allows the students to do is to let me know what they want to talk to me about and get in line digitally in order to do that. Because some students might be nervous to come up and talk and say, okay, can I conference with you now, or feel insecure about it, or somebody else got in front. But through Classroom Q, they get in line, they tell me what they want to talk about, and they can see my Smartboard up with the list of who's first, who's second, etc. I can keep the line for next class. I can export that data. And now I really noticed a big change around. I had 3 guys that they're on 504s and IEPs, if you know what that means. They weren't doing well. We had a heart-to-heart. We had another heart-to-heart. And then I started writing on their rubrics. You did not conference with me one time for this entire HyperDoc. I am not surprised you have a low score. I know you can do better. And the next time I had the data, it showed they conferenced on this day, this day, this day. I went over and thanked them for their engagement. I said, look, it's paying off for you. And I'm going to tell you, their attitude when they walk in the classroom, it's different because they have a way and a mechanism, and it was specific and targeted in their help.
So then you would continue with elaborate. You'll notice that they're set up very similar because students value that repetition. They need structure, patterns. And so anything they learn, anything with a blue outline like that means that it's a link out to something we want them to watch or do. The next way it says 17 minutes somewhere. You want to talk about group shared notes?
Yes.
Okay. So the next way that internet has revolutionized the way we can do things is there are moments where we need to teach and do that directly by standing up in front and imparting the infinite wisdom we have within our brain. No, just try and share something of value to them. And we do that through group shared notes.
So my honors and AP classes that I teach are structured differently. These days I've been gone for a conference. This has enabled me to come to a conference like this because I can use a HyperDoc on days that I'm absent. But honors and AP, it is more collaborative discussion. This is a very, very quiet room, but I know you're listening intently. But what I distribute to the students through Google Classroom is a scaffolding of notes. And this scaffolding is a 2-column system. And we started doing this
4 years.
Yeah, with each other when we went to conferences, and then we were like, oh, why aren't we doing this with the kids? So you'll have the notes in column 1, and then you have just blanks on the right-hand side of these columns, broken down by content standards, however you want to do it. And what the students do is they get in and they choose a collaborative team, usually 4 people. You have the alpha note taker who fills in the scaffolding because these are the kids that are going to be the court reporters when they grow up, and they think every word that comes out of your mouth is golden. And so they will just type it, and I've got it. And then you have your beta note takers who will help alpha if there's a lot of information coming out fast and furious, or they'll throw in the story or the analogy that we used. Then you have Flavor Flav. They don't know who that is. Do any of you? Flavor Flav highlights and makes bold keywords and phrases. Then we have Flip-A-Pic. Flip-A-Pic goes on the internet and grabs a picture that supports what I'm talking about. So they're finding that connection. Or we give them all of our presentations. There's nothing hidden. All the notes are out there, and all that I'm going to use in a presentation, I'll have usually 100 slides that I'm going to show in a presentation, lots of different pictures and supporting information and connections. So they'll go and snap that using their Chromebook while I'm talking, or go find another picture online. Or I'll say, hey, go find a picture of a heart and throw it on there that's labeled and one that's unlabeled so you can use it as your team. They are writing their notes with 4 people. Now, you know they are better than when they're by themselves. And I know you know some students have a hard time thinking, processing what I'm saying, and writing at the same time. And that gets in the way of their education. That should not be happening in this day and age. By having 4 people on those notes, they can each play to each other's strengths. And then I'll tell them, try being a different person this time. And once they started doing that, their notes are fantastic, what they come up with. And that's why they can do their notes from home or from the airport or from the hospital, because they're jumping in. They know class starts at 8:30 and I'm on my computer and I'm in and I'm doing all my same jobs from a distance. And they're part of that team.
It's also really cool to watch. If we say revision history tells all, or version history tells all. So those moments when the students come up and they're like, Mrs. Chevalier, so-and-so's not doing any work. I'm like, okay, let's look, you know? And now I have data to have a conversation with that student who may be an anchor instead of helping their team. And you know, your team is saying you're not doing any work and I don't see anything in here. You know, and that's powerful. They can't go, but
all they're doing is throwing funny memes on and they're annoyed. It's really hilarious when all of a sudden they cut the kid off. They just take them out. They're not sharing. You can see the kid will go, what? I'm not in the group. Why am I not in the group? I'm all, because all you do is put stupid memes on there and they're tired of you. Can I be in the group? I want to be in the group. Let me in the group. Yes, I'll be better. And you know what? Then that's self-policing, and also models what they're going to need to do when they're working, right? They're going to have to learn how to be collaborative. And I'll say, if you throw something nasty down there and say something about me, I go, I'll see it. And I'll see your digital fingerprints all over it. And that motivates them to think and have a positive digital footprint. And we talk about that with blogging as well.
So that's group shared note taking. One of the things we skipped over momentarily would be a low tech moment for us, which is lab notebooking and using a carbon notebook. It doesn't actually have the black carbon paper in there, but they have a record of all the labs they've done, so they can see the growth of their scientific processing of information and data from freshman year to senior year. And they get, it's like a portfolio, and they will take it with them to college, and we get emails, and it's like, Mrs. Chevalier, Miss Litten, you'll never know, we did the exact same lab and I had all the data, you know? Or I'm like the most popular kid in my physics class, you know? And so they're taking it and they're using it, and they're really proud of that. One of the things we can do with Google Sheets is we can create course shared data where they have to report out, just like an actual scientist has to report out their data. They are now accountable to not just their classmates in their period, but all the classmates that are taking that course. And so Winnie can talk about how she uses that to talk about outliers.
Yes, nobody wants to be an outlier. And so when they're presenting their data, if they can see, okay, my data does not fit in at all with everybody else, then all of a sudden they want to redo that. Can I come in at lunchtime and do this again? Do you think you need to? Yeah. Our data, it's not matching any. Well, tell me what you did. And it begins that discussion. And when they analyze their data, when they're making their graphs, they're not doing it just based on their little bits. It's 3 classes worth of AP biology or 4 classes of honors bio that they're writing their graphs on. And we go over the data class period by class period. They know all their data has to be in at a certain point. And then if they're outlier data, I'll put a little X next to it and highlight it in yellow and why they are outlier data. And nobody wants to be that. So it helps them to be thoughtful. And they know that we don't have people fudging data because they're talking right there and reporting it as they go so we can see it. It's a powerful way to incorporate and have them model like what would happen in a real science lab.
The next topic would be homework and taking homework digital, which is really nice because then you don't get but I forgot my textbook at home, or I had to be at gymnastics until like 9:30 at night. Well, did you ever take a break? Did you have your phone with you? You know, and so now that it's accessible, we designed the freshman course without any homework. unless they weren't doing what they were supposed to in class, and then they might have it. But in some courses, they need practice. And so what we can do is we can create a Google form. And what's really nice about this is you can embed help. So for those students who might not have been in class, so they missed and they were absent and they're trying to teach themselves, or if you have a student that's struggling, now I can put in a video that they can watch before doing their homework. So you can add in that scaffolding, you can add in that differentiation. I think one of the biggest impacts high-speed internet is having in curriculum is equity and access. We are allowing everyone to access the curriculum in a way that is meaningful for them. And that's powerful. You're going to close achievement gaps. You're going to see students that didn't think they were good in something excel. And that excites me and excites me for what the future will look like. 8 more. Okay. Oh, talk about Quizziz.
Oh, there's another app. If you're writing down apps, we say Quizziz, but I think it's just Quizziz. And I saw this. I have had some really excellent professional development by being part of digital communities through Twitter. And I think this is how I saw Quizziz. And I decided to try it one time, and I told the kids, this is a beta test on this, but I wanted them to, maybe 10 terms, 12 terms for them to know. And it was just so that they would have the working vocabulary. So when we had our discussion in class, they would know hypertonic, hypotonic, some word that I wanted them to know. And so I said, instead of going home and writing it out on a piece of paper, which requires a piece of paper, and I would have to use a piece of paper for that situation, because if they did it on a document, they could copy, paste, and share. So I wouldn't really know if it was authentic. I said, let's try it a different way. Let's get rid of terms. We'll try it just this unit, and we're going to try Quizziz. And on Quizziz, the idea is you could do it at the very beginning of the unit before you talk, and you give them an online test. They can do it individually, or they can do it with a partner, and they're in competition to get the highest score. And then you do it the next class period, and you do it the next class period, and pretty soon they have 100%, and they spent maybe now a total of 8 or 9 minutes instead of 15 or 20 minutes, and we know that they know them all. And I started doing that one unit, and I said, I'm going to get rid of terms if this works for you. It did work for them. Their scores were the same, if not better. I didn't see any drop in any scores on quizzes and tests, and now I never do terms again. But science has a working vocabulary, and I need them to know it, and Quizziz has replaced that. So it's more engaging, it's fun, less time, and it's green.
Peer feedback can be done in real time. You'll see kids having conversations on the side in the comments on a document. You can see them say, you really should go back and fix that, or highlight this, and those basic revisions. So the product we see is far better than it used to be. As far as rubrics are concerned, we still do these the old-fashioned way. This would be a low-tech moment, because we really want them to have the rubric and the document in front of them going step by step, so that they know that they have accomplished what we have asked of them. We do multiple different ways. Usually it's peer feedback first before they ever come see us. That way they're learning from each other also.
Do we want to do lab maps?
Let's do this first.
Oh, okay. Okay, so one way, this site cannot be arranged.
That's okay, just talk.
Okay, so one way that we wanted to, besides we have them work on their HyperDocs, we conference with them. We do debriefs collaboratively as a class. And then another way for them to work with the information is blogging. Now, to have a blog, you have to have a Google site. So that's one of the things we teach them. And the reason why we're doing that is that when somebody Googles them, I want them to have a positive digital footprint in their history. So we teach them how to make Google sites literally in one day. And they use their Google site to display, and kids do it all differently, but at least one of the documents they display on it is their unit blog. So the blog, we will give them prompts about things we want them to think about, and it gives them a minute at the end of each class period to kind of reflect on what they did and summarize what they did, to give evidence of what they did. They might embed a picture from something they created in Google Draw, or a video that they created, or an image that supports it, and allows them to think about the big ticket items that they should be at that day. The second thing and the blog has to be viewable by anybody in the world. Anyone with the link can view. And we talk about that purposefully, that their audience is the world and what they write. And that helps them to think about all the things they put out there on the internet, and that they need to be careful in what they do. A second item is we wanted to tie together everything they were doing and how it was related to the next generation science standards. So what we have them do is keep a blog about how they're addressing each standard in the next generation science standards. They can't just say they did it. They have to summarize it and give evidence from their work that they discussed it. So we're big on claim, evidence, reason. And so we have them as they keep track of that. So at the end of the entire year, they will see that they addressed this disciplinary core idea, this science practice, this cross-cutting concept, and then photo evidence over at the end. I know we want to do, oh, sure.
So personal impact on us. This whole thing came out of a video that Enoch did with us. He came in and he's like, can you do like a 5-minute video on what you're doing with science? And we were like, sure. Winnie was like, sure. And then I crashed the video. And what was supposed to be 5 minutes turned into 53 minutes of us just like gushing about how enthused we were and how reignited for teaching we were, because we were making connections with students and we were meeting each student where they were. I had never ever known a class as well as I had once we started teaching through HyperDocs, group shared notes, and giving them control of their learning so that we could be facilitator and coach. And in the passenger seat, we still had the brake pedal and the steering wheel like you see in student drivers. But they were trying it, and that was uncomfortable for them. They were like, but what's the right answer? You know, I don't know, you know, go find it. And so that was just so empowering for everyone involved.
And I would say there are about 1 million studies done about what's wrong with education, right? Let's just throw more money at it. We are a data-driven district, and we like to make choices based on data. And one thing I remember from a man named John Hattie, he analyzed all the educational studies, and 2 things, formative assessment and relationship. And if you don't know what formative assessment is, it's like when I talk to the kids, you're going to take, I teach a lot of 15-year-olds. You're going to go take your driver's test. Is the first time you go take your driver's test, or are you going to just jump back in the, in the car and say, I've seen my mom drive a bunch of times. She's taken me to and from school. I'm sure I can do it. I go, no, you're going to go practice. So go practice. Here are some resources for you to go practice. So this way of working allows us to embed formative assessment, checks for understanding where they get real results. It's not, hey, who can raise your hand? And the one talky person always raise their hands, and I'm the quiet person, never says anything. We can use Google Forms, HyperDocs, all of these things to do that. And number 2, in order to do that well, you have to build relationships. And that's the second thing that affects students the most, is knowing besides they're in a safe place in their classroom, but they know that the person that they're working with, that educator, cares about them and is showing them, let's do this so we can get better. Let's do this so we can get better. And I'm going to tell you, it's one of the big transformations, at least in my classroom, in 30 years of education.
So if you're interested in any of the things, and we have a plethora of resources available, or you want to pass this along to someone, please do. Everything is in a Google Drive folder. Our Twitter was up at the beginning. We can put it up here when we answer questions in a moment. We are accessible and we want to share. We have done this for really been digital for about 5 years. We've made mistakes. We'd love for teachers to not make the same mistakes, and so we're willing to share. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll turn it over to Enoch.
Thank you, ladies. We are the last presentation today, so we're going to stay here as long as anybody has questions. So if you want to ask your questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Oh, sorry. Go
ahead. Yeah, it seems to me that other than legal obligations, you almost don't need kids in the classroom, right? At least for half the time. You're almost like halfway to being the Nirvana project, or not the Minerva project, the Keck Graduate Institute school. And I don't know if you've seen that online, but that is one of the Claremont schools has basically created an entire university online where they have students as a cohort moving from city to city across the world over a 5-year period, and they get a bachelor's degree, and it's all online. They have a specially designed learning management system for that. And it seems to me, because Oak Park, I assume, has pretty good resources, I move through there sometimes, that you actually have the ability to sort of redefine education, not just in the classroom, but out of the classroom. You know, using broadband, you basically say, well, if somebody's at the airport, or if they're not in class, they can still participate. So I guess what's the next move beyond that? Because with that, it seems to me you could deliver the curriculum, deliver the material, and have the collaboration in maybe half the amount of time, and with less classroom management.
It would be nicer without the students, right? So just teasing. I would say it's not as dynamic. So the learning could take place. Learning happened today in Winnie's classroom, and she was not there. But the learning is more dynamic, more individualized. The students know you care. That relationship piece really can't be fostered without the face-to-face as well. Not everything we do is digital, so we still value those low-tech moments, and the feedback portion of that would be what I would say we wouldn't want to give that up, even though we have found ways to, yes, increase the amount of content in a shorter period of time. I wouldn't want to give up, though, that relationship piece.
And then I would say on that if you didn't have an educator or enough resources, then that would be a really good way to share somebody out. For instance, I have a YouTube channel, so all my lectures are recorded. We have 7th period support that's embedded as part of our high school, where school day ends at 2:30, but I'm paid until 3:10. So students go to get help from the teacher that they need or make up a test. And I know somebody might need to go get math help, and they know that I'm going to record mine, and it's going to be up on YouTube by the time they're on the bus or whatever to go on their trip, so they can watch it. But it's not the same. It's great as an alternative, but it doesn't replace them looking me in the eye and me seeing where their questions and concerns are and addressing that, and kind of always gauging the feel of the room through formative assessment, so I can adjust what I'm doing. Because formative assessment not only tells the student where they're at, it also is feedback for me. So I can see if they're missing those questions, then I'm going to revisit that or try it a different way. So I think you could do that in a pinch where you don't have those resources, but I think looking the teacher in the face, and I got to tell you, okay, maybe not a forward hug, but a side hug still makes a big difference in a kid's life when you ask about those things, and you can't do that at a distance. Formative assessment and relationship building are the two. Absolutely. I can see you got new shoes, new kicks. Those are super cute. Miss Litten, I like your shoes too. And that is the part that's going to kind of hold them and value, you know, what I have to say that day. It's the mutual respect between the two of us because of that relationship.
Question here in
front. So thank you so much for sharing here and for doing this as well. It seems like you guys have more or less made textbooks. I'm kind of curious about the time it takes you to make one of those HyperDocuments, And also, there's lots and lots of images and stylizations on that. Are you concerned at all about publishing these and sort of media rights that go along with it?
Yeah.
Has that crossed your mind at all?
A lot.
So,
Go ahead,
okay,
Tosa.
all right. So I think the first part of that question was how much time? A lot. I think Winnie and I, this is a semester-long course, so we're talking 20 weeks. Easily, we put in 500 hours a piece the first time around. I can say, though, the second time around, it was all done, right? So except for revisions or bringing in the most recent science, that sort of stuff. But the basics of our curriculum were set. As far as publishing, that was one of those things that initially we set out and we're like, we spent so much time, we're publishing and making something, and that then became, well, how much more time would we have to invest to make sure everything was cited? And so we decided not to go that route. I can tell you we did Google image searches the right way. Not always are you going to find something of quality. Yeah, that would be the big thing, is that you limit the quality. And so we did have to sometimes, use those images because they were the ones that were going to be the most helpful to our students. I can say on the copyright side, because we use Google Classroom to disseminate information, those are like our 4 walls of our classroom. They're password protected, and so copyright's not an issue.
And some information too is proprietary. Like if we bought something that we wanted to use, like Pogles, for those of you that know what a Pogle is, the Pogles were worksheets that would be each kid would have to have like 6 photocopied pages in order for them to do that. So we would take the Pogles and make them into a Google form for them to respond on. So that's proprietary to them. We're using their information to develop our curriculum, but again, through Google Classroom, we were confining it. So that would have to be recreated. We couldn't just, I'm going to tell you, I'm super proud of the physics and that we're doing in the freshman year. And the kids are proud of what they're doing in the freshman year with physics and earth science. I would love to hand it to other schools for them to use. But again, somebody would have to go through it with a fine tooth comb just to take it like that.
Question. Thank you. Sorry I didn't make enough trouble for you during your class.
Yeah, you were really easy.
But maybe I can start now.
Okay.
So what, it sounds like you're very dependent on Google as your primary platform for this whole thing. So what, have you thought about the implications of that over time? How do you expect that to evolve? Is there an alternative to that?
Are you meaning like when Google falls out of favor and we move to the next flavor?
Yeah, Google goes broke or something.
They can't do that. Have we really thought about that?
Well, sometimes things go down, but I can tell you when Smartboards rolled out, how long ago did Smartboards roll out?
First one, 2007.
Yeah. So the first year they wanted to implement them at Oak Park. And so they asked me, to apply to go and do it. And I'm all, I don't need a Smartboard. And the quote that was used at every application after that was my stupid quote that I said. And I said, I don't need a Smartboard. I could use stick and a piece of dirt and I can teach my kids. And it was an ignorant statement to say, but I valued what I could bring to the classroom. I mean, there's been fire drills where I go outside and they listen, go sit around that tree where this lesson's continuing. So nothing's going to replace these minds that work to engage students where they're at. So if it changes, if our platform changes, then we'll change again. In 30 years, how I have changed in giving, I had overhead projector and go like this to make a photocopy. So Google changing does not scare me. Well, we have it saved on multiple places. I've lost everything at one point in my career, and then after I had a seizure and got back on my feet, and from a hard drive freezing. This is pre-cloud, this is when you had disks, everything. It's different now. We have copied it and we've got it in several different places.
Question over here?
So great stuff. Two questions are kind of part. One is, have you had any kind of an issue with, I'll call it nicely replication, but maybe we should call it plagiarism. And so that's part A, and part B was, which I've now forgotten.
We'll address A, and then maybe B will
Yeah,
come to you.
B just came to me.
Okay.
And B was about, have you had any problems with accessibility? That is, some of your students, we've made this assumption about connectivity is always there. We always now have a cell phone. We always now have a laptop or a Chromebook or something like that. And in a complete online curriculum, is there any sort of subset of your students that might not have the kind of accessibility they would need to continue to get the richness of this curriculum?
Okay, so I'll take the first part, and Ellen will take the second part. The first one is digital fingerprints. In a HyperDoc, or we have things we didn't show you today that are on there that you can look at. They're called lab maps. And for a lab map, this is the direction I want them to go in their lab. They might be designing it more in biology and chemistry. We can't do that because we want the building to keep standing. But when they're designing their labs and they're developing it, I say, I need to see your digital fingerprints. I can see when somebody copies and pastes, because I can go into revision history and I can see each letter. I can see each person and what they contributed to the document. So if I get a flat, boom, all of a sudden it wasn't there and now it's there, then I know that that was plagiarized. We have turnitin.com for papers if we want to use that as well. So am I going to catch them every time? Probably not. Are there ways to get around it? Probably. But I got to tell you, revision history is a wonderful way to hold them accountable, and sometimes just the threat of it is enough. You have there's a phrase I used to say. It's not a good one anymore because of what's going on, but you have to make it clear with a hostage. It takes one as an example, and then you show them and show your great disappointment, and everybody knows, and then that's usually all it takes, and they know that you mean business. And I'll let you do the second one.
I would add to that, we also, because we use Google and Chrome, we have a service called GoGuardian that can remotely monitor what students are doing, which is valuable not only as a teacher, that on my screen I can see 36 individual Chromebook screens, and I can say, that prompt is maybe not the right statement, can you close that tab? But also there's filtering that's going on for content, so explicit content and self-harm. And so we're collecting data on that we can grab that way too. So we just had a student who thought they would be creative and run a script on a program called Membean, and we were able to catch that. And that student received a 0. So there are measures in place for that. The second part is that we're looking to go 1-to-1 grades 5 through 12 next year. So right now there are certain departments. I know that's my initiative. That's why Enoch hired me. And there are certain departments that are like English and science at the high school, but it's going to be a huge change for a lot of teachers. And one of the things we've had to learn is that if you're going to assign something that requires the internet for homework, you've got to give enough time that a student who doesn't have the internet at home has time to get to the library or come to 7th period support or something like that. We had the big fires, that the Woolsey fire came through, and our internet was really spotty for a while. And so we had to take that into consideration. In a pinch, you could always print it out, and they could complete it that way if they didn't have access to the internet. Sticks and dirt.
I'm going to jump on the GoGuardian. Just being away at a conference, when I'm on GoGuardian, I can send a message out to all the students simultaneously in my class while they're working, or I can do individual, and they know when I'm on, they can tell. And then I have literally closed out like kids, on the wrong sites, and then they know it's me, and I'm typing in a message just to them. Really? ? Really? And I'm sorry, Miss Litten. I'm sorry, I'll be better.
It's very George Orwell. No, Orwellian.
So from a County Office of Education and supporting our districts, it's great to hear what's happening on the ground, so to speak, and in the classrooms. That's why we're all here for you guys. What do you need from us tech folks?
Internet that always works. And I think that it's hard because we come from a district like, a prophet isn't appreciated in their own land type of a thing. I have in-serviced other districts where they don't have so much support. We have so much support in our district that sometimes they don't take advantage of it. But I would say, generally speaking, it's time to make the changes. And I think you need to reaffirm the message about failure. Failure is a wonderful thing, and it helps guide your learning, appropriate failure. But try this app, and it's okay if it doesn't work. They have to feel free to try it out. And try this, see if this works. Small bites of information. Ellen's working on it, but collaboratively also as a team, but Ellen's in charge. It's a Ludo, and we're doing gamification for professional development. And when I first saw it, honestly, I thought it was stupid. I don't need to play a game. I don't need little points. It just is annoying to me. But I have seen the data, and the data says that this is really helpful. And so this is small bites of professional development that they can do and that they can accomplish. And so they can just do 20 minutes on how to do a HyperDoc and then try it. And in order to get points for it, they have to give evidence that they actually did it, and then they get buyback hours. So for when professional development is something that's targeted, once again, like we're doing for our students, voice and choice, so that it meets each teacher's need where they are at, I think things like that are very helpful to transforming a classroom at a faster pace than just, hey, everybody come to HyperDoc when somebody's not there yet. They don't even know how to make a Google form yet.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you for coming and spending the afternoon with us.